Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our final weekend wrap for the season, unfortunately. We'll be talking about Sturt's great win over the Crows today and not much else, won't we, Nikki and Macca? Oh, hang on a minute. Hang on. Whoa. Wait a minute. Something's going on here. Oh, bloody hell. This is the same problem that... this is the same problem that Scorpus had on Thursday night. Hang on a second. Oh, gee whiz. It's very frustrating. Now, what's happened is, for those listening and wondering what the hell is going on, Windows did an update, and as a result, it threw Scorpus out the other day, and it's thrown me out today, unfortunately. Let's have a look here. All right. Talk now, you fellas. There you go.
What are I going to say?
Are we on, please?
Yeah, we're all good now. So welcome to that. I mean, that's
we're just as much of a shamble as our team.
Pretty appropriate when you think about it. Oh, bloody hell. Never mind.
We kind of started really well for a minute, and then it just went...
Well, as I say, good evening to everyone who's bothered to listen or who will bother to listen to this rather unfortunate final episode of the Weekend Wrap. But nevertheless, we did get through to a semi-final, and, so all is not lost. But we will obviously talk about the game in quite extensive detail. But before we do that, we must also mention the other game that was played on Friday night, which was the game Hawthorn versus the Western Bulldogs. And we must be happy at least that Hawthorn haven't made it this year. The Bulldogs, in a surprisingly... how would you describe it, Macca? Just an awesome display. 16 goals, 11, 107 to Hawthorn, 12 goals, 12, 84, and the king is dead.
Well, intensity again, isn't it? It's the same thing that Sydney did to us. Intensity.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Nikki?
It was the old stages of Hawthorn that just didn't really fire, and I think it's well and truly the fallout from that game they played where they beat the crap out of each other against the Cats. They just couldn't go with the Bulldogs. I don't think the Bulldogs were actually that impressive. I think they're going to get nicely smashed next week by GWS. It looked good up against Hawthorn. I was kind of a bit watching it.
Yeah, but what I liked about what the Bulldogs did, they had 22 players having a crack, and when they took risks all the time, as they did against West Coast, challenging them with handball, trying to run through them. And Hawthorn have a standard pattern of setting up when they defend, etc. And by running at them all the time and drawing them and taking them out of their normal comfortable positions, they found a way to get through quite a bit, and they were just too good. Whether they can do that against the sides that remain, I don't know. But I take my hat off to them. I take my hat off to their coaching panel for coming up with the method that they've used in the last two games, which is really an extension. They've actually become an attacking team when they've been really defensive all year, and so well done by the coaching panel. I hate Luke Beveridge, but well done. Whether that'll work against the other side, we'll find out, but they're still going.
Look, I actually, I think it's a real pointer to Geelong's form, and I actually think it's GWS's premiership to lose at this stage. I really do.
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to get them is being overawed, but they will dismantle Geelong or Sydney. Sydney are going to be sore as buggery with a 6-day break. Whoever the hell thought that was a good idea is beyond me. But
Sydney.
Well, whether it was Sydney or whether it was the AFL or a combination, who knows? But
no, the AFL confirmed it was they went with Sydney's call. Yeah. It was Sydney's preference
because
to play us on the Saturday night.
Yeah. Well,
yep.
they've done themselves in because you'd struggle to see Callum Mills get back in time, although he was pumping up his possibilities. Tippett would have to be doubtful, and they've copped a couple more. So, and it was despite them steamrolling us, it was a bruising encounter, just the sort of game that they played. So it gives Cats all the advantage, and if Geelong get up, I reckon either of those two are going to get thumped by GWS come grand final day if GWS get through, and if the Bulldogs happen to get through, I reckon they're a sneaky chance too.
Well, I don't know whether it's as cut and dried as that, because the thing with GWS is that at times this year they've lost unexpectedly to lesser sides, and there will be a certain nervousness about their side, I would have thought, going straight to a grand final, because I don't think even in their wildest dreams at the beginning of the year they would have expected that. So I think that's their biggest danger. I think that themselves, and you made that point, and I think Geelong are getting it pretty easy, because unless the Bulldogs can make life uncomfortable Sydney can make life uncomfortable for Geelong. Well, I think Geelong are in a very good position too.
Oh, they are to make the grand final, no doubt. It should be a cracking game, Geelong-Sydney. But anyway, we're sort of drifting off the topic here. Let's talk about our game.
Is this because we don't want to talk about us?
That's right.
Oh, do we have to?
Classic
really?
avoidance behaviour right there.
What you say is onto the shit. Yeah.
Onto the shit, right. So, as we all know, the Swannies got up over the Crows, 18 goals 10, 118 to 12 goals 10, 82. A pretty comprehensive sort of a victory by the Swans. We did look to be matching them for parts of the game, and we did have a little sniff coming into the last quarter, but they snuffed that out pretty quick.
Yeah, look, I did a little bit of an analysis on it, and in the first quarter, after they absolutely smashed us to pieces in the opening, say, 10 to 15 minutes of the game, although we did help, there was some horrible kicking. At the end of their first quarter, they were 25 points up. If you look at the next two, if you combine the second and the third quarters, we actually gained a point on them over that particular, that's half of the game. And then in the last quarter, we matched them all through the last quarter, except the 9 minutes when they got a couple of goals, and they won that last quarter by 12 points. So it all comes back to the smashing we got in the first quarter.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what it felt.
Yeah, what it looked like to me, and you're right, I went into the last quarter thinking we were a sneaky chance. We'd certainly got the game back on our terms a little bit.
We didn't deserve it, but we were.
No, well, they hadn't put us away, even in the after quarter time. They hadn't put us away, and we managed to maintain that gap. And I think at one stage we got to 19 points, didn't we?
We did, yep.
Yep, and, you just felt like it just needed one more goal, and we were right in the hunt. But
I reckon at the 19-point mark, it was Tex, I think, that had a set shot for goal. And instead of kicking right through the ball because he was close to the goal, he kicked to the left-hand side, as you always do when you don't bring your foot through hard enough.
Yep.
And that would have been... I remember saying to Mrs. Mack, if he kicks this, will be a sneaky chance to get back into the game. He missed that, and, your bums go bang on the lino or the carpet, depending on where you are. And, you think it's gone again. Your chance is gone. And it's funny how so many times players who would not normally miss will miss that chance when it's so important.
Well, they didn't miss too many, Macca. Jumping ahead of ourselves, but as a general comment, I have a real problem with senior players missing shots like that for goal. Tex has a habit of missing those, and for God's sakes, it's a simple kick. You can kick it off one step. Just shouldn't be missing those. Anyway, let's look at some heads-to-heads before we drilled right down to it, and they absolutely pumped us in disposals by 92 disposals. I think it was 100 to 50 at quarter time or thereabouts. They dominated us in handballs. They really used their handballs effectively to get through our defensive structure. They went at more handballs to kicks, 221 to 224. We had 203 kicks, 150 handballs, which is low for us. We went at 1.35, which even by our standards is slightly biased towards kicking. But our overall disposal count was very low compared to our averages. They outmarked us. We obviously won the tackle count simply because we didn't have the ball enough. Sauce had his colours lowered by Sydney's rucks. We lost the hitouts 47-42. We got 19 to 12 free, so we can't whinge about the umpiring. But just our disposals per scoring shot, we run usually at about 12.8. This game we ran at 16, and on a short ground like Sydney, 16, like 4 disposals per scoring shot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things it is. We actually had more inside 50s than them, 56 to 49, but unfortunately many of those inside 50s were hurried and our forwards didn't really fire a shot in the air. They smacked us in contested possessions, 166-146, which was probably expected. But our strength has always been our ability to maintain possession. But again, we were squeezed up and they killed us in uncontested possession as well. 278 to 201. We only went at 68.6 disposal efficiency to their 73. Whilst we surprisingly won contested mark count 14 to 11, we lost the marks inside 50, which has been another strength of ours this season. 10 to 9 in their favour. They cleaned us up in clearances. They got their usual dominance in rebound 50s. They really did run the ball well out of our defence. And that's really the tail of the tape. All the areas where we are normally strong, they countered us. And all the areas that they're normally strong, they dominated us.
Yeah, look, it comes back to what was the big question before the game, and that is, could we match them in the midfield? And the answer was a resounding no. We got absolutely belted in the midfield. Tomo did get the first 3 centre bounce clearances, but blind kicks into our forward line that didn't cause any chaos as far as Sydney was concerned. And the interesting thing is that if you look at the not only at the statistics of their midfield, but if you look at the efficiency rate of their midfield, all of their midfield operated the 70s, 70 plus. And if you look at our midfield, we had Thompson there with 45%. We got Douglas with 41%. And Atkins, who was directly responsible for 4 goals one way or another, 2 that he should have definitely kicked, and just kicked pissy little kicks instead, and 2 that he gave away by being smart ass and giving 2 to them. So that's a 4-goal deficit to Atkins for a start. He went at 55%. And your mate Jenkins, who touched the ball 4 times, at a 57% efficiency rating. So not only did we get belted in terms of the possession of it, but also the usage of it.
Yep. How did you see that, Nick?
Pretty much that, really. I was saying to... oh, no, you guys are covering it. It's just like, yep, we were crap. I was saying to Macca just before we started that the impression I got from Brad Crouch was that he was too tired. This is his first full season, actually, that he's had. And to me, it showed. Those couple of ridiculous tackles, one was the high tackle, which we've been actually really good at not giving away since the Bulldogs game. It was just too... it was very frustrating. And the other one where he held on to the player too long after they got rid of the ball, it was just, he seemed to be too hard. I think in the midfield, the only one who can slightly hold their head up would be Matt Crouch, in that he didn't go to another level. At least he was consistent with how he's been all year. So I think he's probably the only one. Sloan, they sat on Sloan and he did nothing. He did a couple of little things, really, but we needed him to stand up even more through that midfield, and he didn't do it.
Well, I gave him a pass, Dickie, compared to some of the others, because at least he was busting his guts all the time, whereas some of the others could not be accused of that. I mean, Jenkins couldn't be accused of that. No, I thought Sloane, not without starring, Nicky, was probably in our best players by default with the effort that he put in.
Well, they had a fairly simple tactic.
Nah.
They hard tagged Sloaney pretty much. They had a run with on him pretty much the whole game, knowing that he's the barometer in our midfield, and if you keep him quiet, then the rest of our midfield struggle, and that's exactly how it panned out. Basically, I mean, you mentioned Scotty Thompson. I felt that Scott really tried. I felt like he was.
He did try.
He was in and under. He only had the 20 touches, but he had the 9 tackles. He had the 7 clearances. But despite those numbers, he didn't hurt the opposition. None of our midfielders hurt the opposition in any way at all.
Can't with 45%, mate. Can't.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, Macca. We squibbed it under pressure. We turned it over under pressure. Brad Crouch hot potatoed the ball half a dozen times where he just looked like he didn't even want to take possession.
Yeah.
Look, I agree with you with Matt.
Or like Atkins.
Worst game I've seen Rory play, Rory Atkins.
That goal he should have kicked that he kept trying to get an easier and easier kick, and he just ran himself into trouble.
Yeah,
but didn't work that out. His final kick, he's passed it to a Sydney bloke in the goal square. Yeah. He's a nutter.
Yeah, he's actually the one thing that I will say about Rory is that he's up and about when the team's firing, but I think he sometimes gets ahead of himself a little bit, and he just needs to go back and play the percentages a little bit. You don't want to knock his flair, but by the same token, just ease up on the celebrations until you're a 30 possession a week midfielder. Then perhaps you can let go a bit. Look, let's look at some of the individuals.
Now on the wing,
go on.
Just quickly. Did you reckon in the third quarter, did we move Cameron to the wing?
Yeah, we did. I thought we did.
I thought he was on the ball, actually.
Or I thought he was either on the wing or he was playing a very high half-forward role and was told to roam. And he really was a good spark. I think that's actually one of his better games he's played.
He's one of the good things that came out of the game. He showed that he's a real talent in the making and that he's going to be a star in long term. He's going to be a star.
Look, I really hope that they develop him as a midfielder because his speed and aggression. There were only 2 players on the ground for mine that really showed that they were up for the challenge in the aggressive stakes. Cameron was one, and poor old Jakey Lever, until he got injured, was the other.
He was close.
All over it. In that
Definitely,
first quarter.
Yeah. Actually, I would put McGovern in there too a bit.
Well, yeah, but he, the knock on Mitch is that he doesn't get near it enough. He was trying, but in terms of where in the cold-faced neck where we needed it, Charlie Cameron was the only bloke who was showing any aggression whatsoever.
Oh yeah.
And down back, Lever had set himself to not let himself die wondering. He went for everything, and I thought he was a standout for us in the first quarter. And it was
Best
such
player.
a pity for him. Yeah, I'd agree with that, Macca. Such a pity that he went down, and I'm a bit baffled that we don't really have any injury news on him unless you guys have heard anything.
Ankle, it's definitely his ankle. At this stage, not sure how much damage to the ankle, but he's done something to it.
Okay, as long as it's not the knee, that's what I was worried about.
No, he was in a moon.
It was the ankle.
Definitely the ankle. He's in a moon boot, and I think they'll have. I mean, it could only be tendon for all we know, just a normal sprain. But but anyhow, they'll take care of that, and he'll be right for next year.
All right, so let's look at some individual stats. We got Matty Crouch on 34 touches, 16 kicks, 18 handballs. He had the 5 tackles. He had the 3 inside 50s. He went at only 64.7 disposal efficiency, 12 clangers, which I think is an AFL high, and only the 2 clearances. So again, a more outside game from Matt, as we've seen over the last month or so. 11 contested possessions, 21 uncontested possessions. And unfortunately for Matt, if you're going to play an outside game, you have to hit people on the tit a little bit more than 64.5% of the time. So Unfortunately for him, his efficiency and his ball use let him down. But at least he was in there getting the ball, and hopefully that's just another step in his development.
He gets a great big tick for work rate, though, doesn't he, Phoenix? He gets a big tick for work rate, and and in the way that the game was played, I actually probably gave him our best player because of that work rate, even though his efficiency at 64 point something percent wasn't as good as it should be, perhaps. But a lot of those balls he got too were under tremendous pressure as well.
Yeah, he just coughed it up a bit too much for mine to give him best. But anyway, Sloaney, as we mentioned, got fairly heavily blanketed, had the 23 touches, 12 and 11, 9 tackles, more hit-outs than Jenkins with six inside 50s as well. 13, he did. Jenkins only got three hit-outs. Rory got 6.
Well done, Rory.
13 contested possessions, 7 clearances. So whilst he didn't get a huge amount of ball, 9 tackles, 7 clearances, 6 inside 50s. He did his best. He needs mates in there. Rory Atkins was very, very disappointing. 16 and 6 for a total of 22 disposals. Had the 4 inside 50s. Only went at 54 and a half disposal efficiency with 15 uncontested possessions. If you're going to be an outside player, as I said before, you've got to hit people, and he just didn't do it. 4 clearances, 3 rebound 50s. The thing with Rory, I find, is that he puts himself in the right spots, but he overthinks himself when he's got the ball, and I think he's, as I said, he just needs to get back to basics, Atkins, and play the team system rather than being too cute.
Yeah, he was actually my whipping boy for the day, and McKay gets his whip as usual, of course, but Atkins gets a special one because for the very reason that you just said, many times he was in a position just to do something positive, and then just try to overcomplicate the situation and end up messing it up. And as I said, he was directly responsible for losing 2 goals one way and losing 2 goals the other way, and that was very, very costly.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say to that, Macca, and I was going to mention it at the end of just talking about the midfield, but I'll say it now. When you've got a midfield that has 2 old stages in Scotty Thompson and David McKay, I'll put him in there. He's played 160-odd games, together with Rory Sloane, who's an All-Australian. We cannot be relying on our first and second year midfielders to be carrying the bulk of the ball. And, we get frustrated with the Crouch boys, we get frustrated with Rory Atkins, Jared Lyons was down on input. Richie Douglas is the other senior bloke. If our senior blokes in the midfield can't deliver in a final, and they haven't delivered in a final for a long time now, it's about time we turn them over.
Yep, can't argue with that. And this will be a bit of the discussion later, I think.
Yep, Richie Douglas, 8 kicks, 9 handballs, 17 disposals, had the 4 tackles, went at 41.2 disposal efficiency, 4 rebound 50s. Just a shocking game by Richie Douglas. DMAC, 13 and 6, 4 tackles, although pretty loose definition of tackle, I would have thought. 6 inside 50s, most of them ineffectual. Had 13 uncontested possessions, 4 clangers. Jared Lyons, 4 and 15, only 4 kicks for Jared, and his kicking is a weapon, so we needed him distributing, and he couldn't get on the end of a chain. Only the 2 tackles from Jared, and 4 clearances, so down on his output as well. Brad Crouch, obviously the 8 and 10, 6 tackles, which seems Brad Crouch is playing a very reactive style of game at the moment. He's all right when he can, tackle or get in and under, but when he's actually got to be proactive with the ball, he struggles at the moment. I don't know whether that's just pace of the game and fitness or confidence, but he's supposed to be a creative midfielder and he's not.
For a bloke of his quality, he looked outclassed, didn't he?
Oh, didn't look anywhere near it, Macca, did he?
No. He looked one of the worst of the midfielders. He looked as if he was the new boy on the block.
So, Nick, what's your read on the whole midfield situation? I've just gone through some individual stats there. What, as an overall comment on our midfield, not only for the game but in general, what's your view there?
Well, I think Thompson definitely does need to be moved on. I would say that Douglas is going to find himself replaced next year by Knight. He's kind of been playing that role in the SANFL when he's come back in, and I much prefer. I think Riley's going to give a hell of a lot more contest. To be fair to Douglas, a little bit last night, that was actually one of the few times this season I've been really putting his body over the ball and was actually getting in and under, which we needed at times, but he didn't do it enough, and then he made some really stupid mistakes, like that handball to Hartigan. So I think if we can land, the rumours are somebody like a Rockcliffe, and I think pushing Charlie and maybe swapping like Charlie, Miller and Cameron through the forward line and through the midfield to give us a bit more of that outside run and speed and class, because not only do those three guys have that, they also have such competitive and hard natures. So I think we've got some solutions to the issues that we can see now. They're sitting in the reserves.
But, Nicky, Charlie, Miller and Cameron's only two blokes. Charlie is Cameron.
I meant Menzel.
Okay, I'll accept that.
It's been a long day. And interestingly, in the SNFL finals today, Menzel played through the midfield a bit as well till he hurt the outside of his knee. But he was swapping, as he has been throughout most of the season, that he'll play high half forward, but then he'll also go either on a wing or into the midfield. So I think we do have some speed that's coming through, and we know Miller can actually stand up in finals, even if it is at SNFL level. No. He's done that 2 years in a row now. No. We've seen Charlie do it.
Wayne Miller,
so
I'm prepared to call this now. Wayne Miller will never be an AFL midfielder.
Yeah, I agree.
On the wing?
Never.
Where do you see him playing then, Phoenix?
He's a small forward, unfortunately. He's too light.
Yeah,
too light.
Well, at this stage of the game, you know.
Yeah, but that's what you think about Charlie, and then he hits him hard.
No. I never put Charlie and Miller in the same conversation. Charlie's a hard nut, knows how to tackle, has blistering speed. Miller is an agile, quick player, but he's very much an outside player. And at AFL level, he does not carry the body strength to be up and around the contest. I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing it.
To Phoenix, 100% right. Cameron's background again, he was a rugby player as a junior, and that's why
and a baseballer.
Yep, that's why the hard hits don't bother him. That's how he's used to playing that way. Whereas Miller is a dodger, he doesn't want a finger laid on him. So
that's right.
So they are totally polar opposites.
That's not to say that Miller won't be a gun for us, Macca. I'm not saying that, but it won't be in the midfield. Whether he eventually, is our next Eddie Betts. I could see that. I just can't. And he'll have runs through the midfield, I'm sure. But
yeah, I was going to say that.
He will not form part of our core midfield group. And I'm sorry, Nick, but I don't reckon Menzel will either.
But that's what. Well, I'm happy to think
these guys they'll be guest midfielders in the sense that they will. You'll have your core midfielders, and these guys will just run through there for bursts just to give the midfielders a rest and also to add just a little different touch. But they're not going to be your core midfielders.
In our current list, the only
but that's why I named more than one of them.
Yeah. I'm not bagging you, Nick, at all. And they will have midfield roles to play. But in my opinion is, in terms of core midfield group, I don't think either of them will be that first three or four. The only blokes that I can see possibly breaking in and becoming core regulars for us are Riley Knight and perhaps a left fielder in Greenwood, who's pretty raw. But
he's not that left field.
Well, he is to outsiders. I mean, we've been watching him, so you can see it. But in terms of that big-bodied midfielder, unfortunately, Cameron Ellis-Yeoman, as much as he could fill that role, I don't think the club will give him a chance. I think he'll be moved on. There's still queries about him simply because we haven't seen him play in that role enough. He looked like being a revelation when he burst onto the scene a couple of years ago, and then inexplicably he's been sent to the twos and hardly played since. So I can only see Knight and maybe Greenwood in a couple of years. Knight needs to still put on some bulk as well.
And Knight was very, very good at getting the ball today, but he had a real down day with his disposal today. I don't know why, but he just wasn't quite with it with his kicking. But yeah, he's been out for a lot of the year, so I suppose that's part of an excuse. But he's an A-grade player. He could certainly do the role. I was just thinking about if Charlie does come into the midfield, well, Miller is the obvious person to go down and take his spot in the forward line, isn't he?
Yeah. I'm very bullish about Charlie playing up the ground as long as he can lift his disposal count.
Yeah, I think he should.
I think so too. He has 17 touches and he's certainly played with intent. He had the 5 tackles, had 6 inside 50s, 3 clearances as well. In a losing team that was getting towed up around the contest, he was the one shining light. Let's talk about the back six. We had a couple of unfortunate injuries there. We had Talia going down with what looked like a groin, and obviously Jakey Lever, who was probably best on for us, going down with what you guys reckon is an ankle, which I'm thankful about. We had Brodie Smith coming off halfback, only had the 16 touches. 2 inside 50s, went at 87.5% disposal efficiency, but that's probably on a pretty low disposal count. 3 clearances, 4 rebound 50s. He was another one, I think, along with Rory, who they recognised was pretty critical to our ball movement, and they sat on him pretty hard. We had Hardigan, who I thought, despite a couple of brain farts, did really well when he was without cover on Franklin in the second half.
On Franklin?
Yeah, I thought Hardigan did. I thought he went pretty well.
I thought he actually did quite well on.
Yeah,
that's what I said, Mick. That's what I said. I thought he did really well on Hardigan. Franklin when he had no cover.
But I am with you, Phoenix, in the sense that when he had to think, that's the trouble. I hate it when he has to think. He's going to F it up. Whereas when he's just playing by instinct, he does very, very well.
Yeah, and again, he had no cover. He had our tactic all season down back with our big tools is to have a third guy coming up over the top. Unfortunately, with Jakey going down and with Charles, ineffective, he was one out, and I thought he did more than serviceably. I thought Cheney was probably our most effective defender. He only had the 11 touches, but I thought he looked the most solid at ground level. Lukey Brown had a stinker.
Stunk. It really stunk.
Yep. Got creamed.
We shouldn't play injured players in finals.
No, very true. But being injured doesn't stop you from squibbing, Nick. And I saw Lukey Brown squib a couple, particularly early on, and it didn't look good. It was obviously a tough, hard opening quarter, and we all said during the week, the whole team said that we were up for the contest and we're expecting him to come out hard. Well, it needed a few players to make a statement, and Luke had the opportunity a couple of times to really put in hard, and he didn't do it.
I can't argue with you. I thought that was probably one of the worst game he's put in for a long, long time, and it was at the very wrong time.
Yep, obviously.
And it was very that first hit with Heaney when that happened. And I'm just looking at going, that was just so un-Luke Brown-like. I've never seen him play like that before.
Yeah, and the whole team was timid, Nick. We knew what was coming at us, and it needed someone to make a statement. We needed to let them know that we were up for the contest, and no one was willing to do that. Rory Laird had the 28 touches as usual, 16 and 12, 6 marks, 3 inside 50s, went at 90%, had the 4 rebound 50s. I didn't think it was the best 28 disposal game that Rory's ever played, but he was certainly reliable. I just think we were caught so short down back personnel-wise that he, it was pretty much all hands on deck in terms of just making sure they didn't score. So, I think Rory was probably in our top half a dozen without being brilliant.
Oh yeah, I thought I was happy with his game. If you take it on a relative basis to his teammates, he had a good game.
Oh yeah, and like I said, 2 down in defence. All of a sudden, he can't be that chop out distributor, unfortunately. So that really hurt us. Forward line, we had. Tex had 16, 8 marks.
Do we have one?
Well, they rocked up. Well, they were there, but, Tex 2 goals, 6 inside 50s. 4 contested marks. Most of those, I think, came after the horse had bolted. I just felt like... anyway, we'll go through the rest of them. Tommy Lynch, only the 16 touches. He was another one that they recognised, I think, as a key player.
They sat on him.
And they sat on him pretty hard. But at some stage, Tommy Lynch is going to have to learn to play with that. He's going to have to get stronger because he can't be our link man on his terms. Teams get worked out. We've been worked out. They know how to shut us down. And those players need to step up. And I thought Tom was just a little bit soft at times. Took the 5 marks, 2 inside 50s, only the 2 contested possessions, just an almost game from Tommy. Who else do we have? Mitchie McGovern tried hard. He's obviously the 4th stringer there. Had the 12 disposals, the 5 marks, kicked 2 goals, 6 inside 50s. I think what we get what we should expect from Mitch as a first-year player, and he certainly wasn't our worst up front.
I thought he played his role, given the fact that he got no support from Jenkins at all, Eddie Betts was being camped on very hard indeed, and did, in my opinion, did a good job to get his 3 goals. As you say, Lynch was down, Tex was not dominating, although he wasn't hopeless. Tex, I'd say his game was reasonable without starring. There wasn't much else in the forward line to support Mitch, or for Mitch to support, whichever way you want to look at it. Yeah. And I thought that he did some other stats that don't show as a kick or a handball, but they helped the team. Be it that he jumped and knocked it down or whatever, or knocked it on from the ground. And I thought he walked out with a badge that said pass on it.
Well, what I liked about him was that when there was somebody needed to take responsibility to kick that goal, he was willing to do it. And as you said, Macca, for a first-year player, that's what really pleased me about his game. He was limited in terms of how that ball was coming into the forward line. Sometimes he was actually a little bit responsible for how that ball was coming in. But I was satisfied with how he played in a final. Yeah. I was, this is a guy who's had to stand up in a really hard final. We know that Sydney is a hard team to play against, and he did okay.
Yeah, it gets a pass mark from me. I was happy with his game.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. The bloke, Eddie Betts, you mentioned. The one thing that disappoints me about Eddie sometimes in big games is that his ball handling at ground level just starts to go a bit amiss. He soft hands the ball a bit, and sometimes he doesn't take it cleanly, one grab. And when the pressure's on, he often does that. He seems to be more worried about his next move than actually taking the ball. And there was a few times where he just soft-handed the ball a bit. And I also didn't like the going for the speckies. We needed him at ground level, and perhaps it was a result of no other bugger trying to take a contested mark. But I just felt a couple of those attempts were a bit out of place. Having said that, the one on the wing, if he'd have taken that, it would have been mark of the bloody century. But
gee, he would have bumped his head on a cloud. He was so bloody high.
It was high. Bloody hell. Only the 8 kicks as well, and that's a really key stat for Eddie. Eddie is a distributor, and he loves to goal assist. No handballs, 8 kicks. really telling stat there. Kicked the 3 goals himself, as you said, 4 tackles. I felt like we needed to try and break his tag a bit. I was actually a bit disappointed by the way that we just left him down there. I would have liked to have actually seen him. I would have actually liked to see him shifted out of there, Macca. In fact, I was actually a bit disappointed that we started him there. I felt our setup at the first bounce was actually really poor. I would have cleared out the forward line if I was Pike. And the one bloke that we knew they were going to sit on was Betts, and I would have had him started off half back, and I would have played him off half back for the first 10 minutes of the first quarter.
I think you and I would have started the setup exactly the same, because that's how I would have set it up too. So that it was all open in front of us, but that wasn't to be, unfortunately.
No. Now, I'm not going to carry on, but Josh Jenkins was an absolute liability. 2 kicks, 5 handballs, 7 disposals, took 1 mark, kicked 1 point from 25 metres out in a slide angle. Only 2 tackles, only 3 hit-outs. What else? He went at, for those 7 disposals, he went at 57.1% disposal efficiency. And that's it. We just signed this guy up for 5 years on a massive contract when he had trade currency, and we need a midfielder. Fuck me dead. Seriously.
Well, I've got to say that you can have good games.
Have you already marked this as explicit?
This was I was going to say good games, average and bad, but this was a turd of a game, wasn't it? And you can only put it down to the fact that he was injured and shouldn't have played.
I'm sorry, Macca, but the way the ball was coming into our forward line with some of those high bombs, injured or not, you can make a bloody contest. Surely, if they picked him at 75% fitness or whatever, they would have said, Josh, it's a small ground, the ball's going to come in high. When it does, we just need you to contest. Well, I don't know what he was contesting, but it wasn't the freaking ball.
No,
it was the most insipid game by a tall player. Like, he's, 200 centimetres or thereabouts? It was the most insipid, soft game by a tall player I have ever seen.
He's not getting an invite to your birthday party, is he, Phoenix?
No, he's not. It was disgraceful. Because if Jenkins takes 2 or 3 marks and kicks 2 or 3 goals, it changes the complexion of the game. And we had more inside 50s than Sydney. And the reason why they bounced it out is because we weren't contesting. We just needed Josh to step up and make a contest and give Eddie an opportunity, give Charlie an opportunity, and he just didn't. Simply.
Now, just looking for a comment from the both of you on this particular one. Alir, the way the game was set up in the first half, or in particular, Alir was on his own, so we played one man short in the forward line, and Alir, he was the man that they designated to be the loose man, and a very tall man and a very good mark, and for a first-year player, a very, very good player. And we just managed to find him time after time, and I kept thinking to myself, while we're in this bad patch, surely we've got to match that guy up just to get everything back on even terms.
He wasn't loose. He was on Lynch.
Yeah, exactly right. He wasn't loose, Macca. I don't think he was loose.
I think he was.
No, I don't think he was.
Nope. No. He was on Lynch, and then we actually engineered a change. We actually had McGovern, and McGovern did quite well on him. And for a while there, he was on Tex, and Tex did quite well on him. I'm sorry, the commentators might have raved about him. He only kicks 30 metres. He kept doing those little short kicks, and we weren't smart enough to figure out he was only going to do those short ones. He can actually kick it quite a long way. He refused to take those options. So he was okay.
I know, because he had the audacity to kick it to a teammate.
But he wasn't outstanding.
I thought he was in the first quarter.
We weren't giving them much help.
Have a look at the tape in the first quarter. He got a lot of it in the first quarter.
Yeah, 12 kicks, 9
It's been
handballs,
deleted.
5 marks, 3 tackles. went at 71.5% disposal. We had 5 clangers though, Mako, 2 rebound 50s.
Yeah, look, his second half, when there was a lot of pressure on him, he dropped right away. But in the first half, I'm going to have another look at it because he was always seemed to me always to be on his own, and I assumed he was playing loose.
Yeah,
It's because Tommy Lynch
because he was running away from Lynch.
Tommy Lynch wasn't running back. And
Yep.
I think my overall comment about this whole game, irrespective of individuals, is that the game was lost on effort, and that to me is the most disappointing aspect of the loss. That it wasn't. You can put it down to personnel. You can put it down to key people being down or weak midfield. We didn't try hard enough. We did not try hard enough, and that's what it came down to, and that's very disappointing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you are right. No matter how we analyse it, no matter how we slice it and divvy it up and look at this area and that area, it did come down, particularly for the first half of the first quarter. They had great intensity, great effort, and we were just reactive and timid. We finally, came good and started to match them, but by then the game was lost.
What I've seen
Ridiculously, actually, it wasn't.
What was that? Sorry, Nick?
Ridiculously, the game actually wasn't lost. There was still plenty of time, and if we pulled our finger out, I think we could have actually gotten back in the game.
I just think, no, but the injuries,
were down.
Nicky, we also, once we were actually putting in and
They had to.
And playing like but ours were key, 2 key position players in the back lines. That's very, very difficult to cover. You don't have those spare on the bench.
There were 2 key moments in the game, Nick, where the game was there to be won or lost. One was at the opening bounce and for the first quarter, and we were sadly lacking. And one was in the last quarter when we had a tiny sniff. I just had a feeling that Sydney were just tiring a little bit. Their intensity had dropped off a little bit, and we needed to give one last effort, and we didn't give a yelp. And that, to me, was the most disappointing part. We did not even give a yelp. And what I've seen from us most of the season is that we're very, very good when the game is being played on our terms. When we're able to possess, when we're able to share the ball around by foot, spread defence and run without too many, too many players impeding us or whatever, we're great. But when the game gets tight, when the game gets close, and we're just not hungry enough. That group of players is not hungry enough. And you've got to put it down to the senior players.
Well, the interesting thing is Mark Bickley said after the game that he thought that Adelaide was 5 players or 5 changes needed in the side to be a premiership side. And he nominated... he was pushing to who are these 5 players that need to be replaced. And I'm going off memory here. Thompson was definitely one. McKay was another one. Surprisingly, a better ruckman or at least some help then if you don't get a better ruckman for Sauce. But that's 3. Trying to think who the other 2 were. And he said trade Luke Brown. That's 4.
Richard Douglas.
And Richard Douglas. That is the 5th one.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much around the mark.
And he said, so basically what they do have to do, and that's, against what we've been talking about, who's coming up out of the second, we have to have a quality midfielder in there, and we don't have a quality midfielder. And, as he said, there's talk about Adelaide are a better side without Dangerfield, or Adelaide are as good a side without Dangerfield. He said it's all crap. When you boil it down, we need a quality midfielder. I think Binks has got it right.
Oh, look, I think it's bloody obvious. At the end of the day, through bad luck or bad management, we didn't fill the hole that Danger left, and anyone that underestimated the hole that Danger left was just deluded. And yes, as a team, we worked very hard to try and cover that hole, but personnel-wise, we didn't really have anyone fill that void. I mean, Rory stepped up, but Rory was a good player anyway. We didn't have anyone in there to fill the gap, and I don't want to talk about this now, but I will just say that this is why I'm so pissed off that we gave Jenkins a 5-year deal, because we've got a ton of forwards, and he's not a KPF. He doesn't play like a KPF, so you've got to put him in a mid-sized forward category. And he had currency, and there's a bloke out there, Tom Rockcliffe, that has expressed, whispers about wanting to move. Brisbane need a forward. Perfect opportunity. And we locked this guy up for 5 years, and it just makes me cry, because we are going to have to put up with this shit for 5 years now. And we won't find an A-grade midfielder in this trade period. I could almost guarantee it. And if we do find one, we're going to have to give up a first-round pick for it, which makes me weep in such a strong draft this year. And I just think we've managed this whole situation terribly.
Well, that's as it may be, and we can't go back and correct it. So all we can really talk about is what we can do from here on in. And at the moment, the only one I can see that might be on the market is Rockcliffe. And if we have to give up a first rounder, then I just think so be it. Because if we front up with the same midfield again next year, as Pickley said, and I agree with him 100%, our defence, when they are all there, is good. Our forwards, probably when we're going well, they're the best in the comp. And it all comes back to that midfield, and we just need that quality into the midfield, a real quality inside mid and a fast outside mid, and he said that would do the trick.
You're very quiet, Nick.
Well, there's not much really to add, because
I'm an equal opportunity podcaster.
I'm just sitting there going, yeah, it's just like, I'm just sitting there nodding my head quite a bit. For me, the interesting thing is that there's not just one A-grade mid that's actually up for grabs. There's two. Because there's Tom Mitchell from the Swans.
We won't get Tommy Mitchell.
Look, I'd love to have Mitchell.
Well, I don't think Hawthorn are going to be able to get him. They've put their own mirrors come out and been very obvious about it. I think that actually does a disservice to Hawthorn, and allows other clubs to actually start sniffing around Mitchell.
I don't know how they're going to do it.
Performance on Friday night. Would you want to go to Hawthorn now?
Yeah, but Hawthorn always get their man. You have a look at it, Nicky. Every time anybody said they want to go to Hawthorn, they shuffle. No. What?
Not many have actually said that. There's actually only been a couple. Other ones, it's only happened at the very last bit, when I think most of the back and forth has already happened. It's only come out after it's been a bit of a fait accompli. Hawthorn have been very good at running that PR campaign of everybody wants to come to us and we get them. If you actually think, most of the players they've got, they actually haven't got big name players in. Lake was not really that big a name. Frawley wasn't that big a name. Gunston, yes, he was an up-and-comer with us, but he wasn't really that big a name either. They've now got O'Meara and Mitchell, who are two very big names. These are first-round players.
I wouldn't say Mitchell's a big name, and just O'Meara was a big name until everyone realised he didn't have any knees. I'm actually surprised that Hawthorn are putting up their hands for O'Meara, because he's failed a couple of tests as far as
they've actually made mistakes.
Yeah, but no,
they've actually made mistakes. Gartlett.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the story as far as O'Meara is concerned is Sean Burgoyne. Sean Burgoyne had no knees either, and he was regarded as a cast-off and a write-off. And Hawthorn claim they've got this technique of managing players with that particular problem and getting the best out of them at the same time. And nobody could decry the fact that Sean Burgoyne's had a terrific career.
Yeah, but Burgoyne had a body of work behind him before he went there, Macca. It's a bit of a stretch to compare that with O'Meara, who has talent, but certainly hasn't put a body of work down yet.
No, but this is why O'Meara wants to go to Hawthorn, because they've spun him, correctly or incorrectly, the story that they did this with Burgoyne and they'll do it with him.
Well, time will tell. I don't want to go...
Ask Essendon supporters about how Hawthorn were able to do that.
Yeah, well, that's another conversation. I don't want to get too much into this discussion because we've got our Tuesday night show for that. But needless to say, I think we're all in agreement that we're a couple of sheep short in the midfield, and we need a couple of blokes to stand up. Look, I don't think all is lost. I think, Brad Crouch is an enigma at the moment. You really hope that this is a stepping stone to the rest of his career and he enjoys a good pre-season and fulfills what we all expected was his potential.
Well,
but I tell you what, I'm starting to doubt it a bit.
On what we've seen, you'd have to. But my mind goes back to when his maiden season, and I remember, I think he's in the 30s, or he got 30-something possessions in one of his very, very early games, and he just showed that he can be a really dynamic midfielder. And I think that with a full pre-season behind him, hopefully he will be a lot better player than he has been since he's resumed with us this year. And, he better be, otherwise we haven't got much on our hands.
Well, you look at Western Bulldogs and their midfield, and they've got quite a young midfield as well. Their profile isn't actually dissimilar to ours. And it's easy to say with a guy like Bradwell, when he had those 30 touches, we had a better midfield. We had Danger and, a younger Scott Thompson, etc., etc. But there comes a point where these boys, Matt and Brad, and Lyons if he hangs around, Charlie Cameron if he comes in, Rory Atkins, these types, Riley Knight, etc., they're just going to have to take the bull by the horns and just accept responsibility that they are the midfield, and it's their opportunity, and they need to put the work in. At the moment with Brad, though, I just don't know how he gets from where he is at the moment to being that silky player that we thought he was going to be.
It's a fair comment, and it's hard to argue with you on what we've seen, but I've still got hope that might happen. And you're right about the Bulldogs and their young players taking responsibility. And the way that Bontempelli stepped up from being a good player to the best player on the ground in that particular final was outstanding. And, you really saw the birth of a future champion, I think.
And I'm going to put something out there, and it's not well thought through, but I've always had a bit of an issue with Scotty Thompson pulling rank and having a very big say over proceedings in our midfield. And our younger boys play like they haven't been given license to play, if that makes sense. They seem very one-dimensional and restricted in terms of what they're going to do. And I just wonder if Scotty Thompson is, retired off or given less minutes in the midfield, and we actually hand over the baton a bit to some of these young blokes, whether they can actually blossom a little bit. Because, like I said, it wasn't a well-thought-through comment, but it's just a feeling that I have.
Well, they do defer to him, don't they? I mean, Tomo does act as a senior midfielder in there. And he has been for a long, long time. So I think there's a bit of sense in what you're saying there. And if Tomo isn't there, what we'll find is that some of them will step up and become the next Tomos, and others won't make it.
So, Nick, would you go after Rockcliffe?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you can get him.
Oh, I'd move heaven and earth to get him. I mean, if we don't get somebody, and I think he's the one that's most likely to be able to be got, and that's unless they've got something up their sleeve that we don't know about. And with Adelaide, they never do announce what they're doing, so that could be possible. But look, the guy averages 30 possessions a game. He averages 30 possessions a game, and that's over his career. So
And that's not easy ball either. He does get his own pill quite often.
No.
Rockcliffe.
Exactly. And so he would be a big asset to us.
Yep, agreed. All right. Well, look, we're going to leave it there. That was the wash up of our semi-final loss. I don't think there's much more we can say, and we could have probably summed it up in 3 words. We sucked badly.
That's true, but it wasn't absolutely a totally wasted year in the sense that we had a new coach, a new style of footy being introduced, and we, on paper, we didn't go any further than we did last year, but in practice, I think we actually did go further, but then blew it at the end, and as a result of that, the records will always show that we only went as far as we did last year. But I think we did gain some ground.
Well, 16 one-round wins over, what was it, last year, 13 or whatever. Most seasons that gets us the top 4 spot, home final, when things might have been different. There's no doubt that losing to West Coast was a terrible result and made life very, very difficult for us. And, who knows, we might have been sitting in a prelim talking about playing Sydney after they've had a bruising encounter over someone else with a 6-day break, and we could have been Geelong. So never mind, such is life. And probably the one wish that I have is that we're actually active over the off season and do something about it. I would hate to see more of the same next year with the same people. We need a bit of a changing of the guard, and hopefully Don Pike, now that he's been in the job a year, he's given people, opportunities to prove their worth. Hopefully now he makes some of his own hard decisions, and the first one they've got to make is Scott Thompson. I think that'll be a key.
So, and what do you think they'll do?
I think they'll give him a year.
Nikki?
I think they might move him on. I think it will be held out a little bit, just seeing what's out there and what's available. I'm pretty sure that Justin Reid's already been touching base regarding a few things. But it was very interesting because apparently somebody reported at the final last week, as they were walking off, Sloaney was kind of like grabbing his hand and trying to get him up as if to wave to the crowd, as if to say, this might be your last game here.
I actually noticed with him after the game last night that he was relatively emotional, I thought, and the way he spoke to some players actually looked like he was saying goodbye. So I don't know whether that's right or not, or whether he's just saying, I mightn't be here next year, I don't know.
Well, when you get to his age, that opportunities don't present themselves all the time. There's a chance that we might not make the 8 next year, or there might be a chance that even if he is retained, that he's not in the team come finals time. So he would have seen this very much, I think, as his last opportunity to play in a grand final. So irrespective of his contract status, I think he would have been fairly emotional just for that. Unfortunately, I think that we'll give him a year. I don't think we should, but I think we will. Nathan Van Berlo sets precedent in that regard, and we'll touch on Nathan in a moment, but we will see. And I think what we do there, along with some contracts like Jared Lyon, will be a very good indicator as to what our attitude is, not only of our review of the season this year, but what our direction is going forward. Anyway, let's move on quickly to the SANFL. We've got about 10 minutes to talk about that one. And Sturt got up, so that's not all lost.
You're a happy boy.
It's not all lost. Sturt got up, 15 goals, 13, 103 to Adelaide, 10 goals, 8, 68.
Woo, bloody who.
Extremely good performance by the underdogs. Had probably the whole SANFL.
Excuse me? Sturt were not underdogs.
Of course they were the underdogs.
No, they were not. I went to that game expecting Sturt to win.
No, you might have.
Not us. Sturt were going to. Anybody who's watched them play this year?
Nikki, bookies don't give money away. And Sturt were like $2.35 outsiders. So the line was, I think the line was
Well, they were
17 or
stupid.
something like that. Well, bookies aren't stupid because it's their money. So, but anyway, we got up 15-13, 103 to Adelaide, 10 goals, 868. Adelaide made a little run at it towards the end.
Did you hear that, Macca?
Well, it is we. I am a Sturt supporter. I declare I'm a Sturt supporter, and I couldn't give a rat's ass how the Adelaide twos go, to be honest. So I'm quite happy about that. But in the spirit of it being a Crows podcast, and I will temper my delight. Look, Riley Knight had a reasonable game. Harry Wigg, I thought, had a good game. Mitch Grigg was quietish, only the 19 touches. I think that was the key, actually, for Sturt. Our midfield overall was quiet. I mean, even Knight and Wigg were slightly unders in terms of their disposals. Griggy very much unders for his disposal count, only 19. So we didn't have the midfield dominance, I think, that we've enjoyed through many, many games this season.
Yeah, that's a very good summary of it, actually. We did get beaten in the midfield by Kirkwood and Leonard and even Aidan Riley, who one of our discards. And I think that they really touched us up in the centre of the ground. And Grigg started very, very well, but then faded as the game went on. Harry Wiggy was pretty useful. Knight was pretty useful, but that's all they were.
Nick, you were there, weren't you?
Yep. We lost it, unfortunately, with who we had to select. We were too tall down back and we were too tall up forward. And that's when we struggle, is when we literally have to play Loudon, Deer and Hunter in the forward lines. And if you looked at the matchups that were going on in our back lines to their forward lines, I mean, Keith was standing on a guy who actually only came to his waist at times. Ramsey had an absolute dog of a game.
Shocker,
I've never actually seen him that bad. Poor bugger.
Unfortunately, I think that's going to lead to his delisting, to be honest.
Yeah, which is a pity because I think he actually has something to offer. In the midfield, we actually were doing really well at the first half of the first quarter, and because of where I was sitting, I could hear Uni talking to O'Keefe as they walked down, and Uni's just looking at him going, we didn't win any contested ball in the second half, and that's the second half of that first quarter, and that's when Sturt got their run on. So the emphasis was to get back into that contested ball. We just did stupid kicks. We would actually win the ball, and then they would kick it, and Dad and I would look at each other and going, well, I don't know who that was to, but there was only a Sturt player there. So Hampton was one of those who managed to pick out Sturt players very nicely. We just could not kick it to the advantage of our forwards. So the fact that we managed to get scores at times, I was quite impressed with.
Oh, I think you're a bit harsh on Hampton. And, he did it a couple of times, Nicky, but he had others that did a lot more than them. Yeah, twice.
Yeah, he did.
I tell you this,
but they caused goals.
I tell you the stat that I like the most. 34 free kicks.
Who did you like the most?
34 free kicks.
Oh, that was shocking.
And it was running at 33 to
5.
No, to 11, or was it 12? And they whacked out six stupid, silly frees at the end to make it look not quite so bad. But it's plain bloody cheating. That's all it is. And it's the same as the McGeary medal count. Plain bloody cheating. And if they don't want us in the SAFL, well, we'll take our $400,000. They can all crumble and go bloody broke.
I didn't have to put any fucking bait on that hook. I just threw an empty hook out there.
I will say, though, there was one umpire in particular who did wait for the crowd to tell him what free he needed to pay. It was ridiculous. It really was. Now, I'm somebody who has actually umpired, and I'm just looking at Dad going, he wasn't going to call that. It was only because the crowd got up in arms. He went, oh, okay, I'll pay this one now. It's like, dude, if you saw it, you would have called it 30 seconds beforehand.
Look, as
ridiculous.
As an impartial observer, I felt like Adelaide were just very untidy around the contest. They tackled high.
Yeah, we were a bit.
High, low, without the ball.
Oh, hang on. hang on, Macca.
Yep.
The best call of the day from the Sturt man sitting next to me, who lamented that they weren't allowed to. Earlier, he'd lamented that they weren't allowed to swear anymore when the warning came. You know, if you see any antisocial behaviour, you know, report it. And he's like, "Oh, it's no fun. You're not allowed to swear anymore." He's standing there with two like really young kids, and I'm going, "Shouldn't be swearing in front of them, but you're the parent." But when O'Brien did that tackle front on,
I was swearing
right?
at home.
You know, when O'Brien did that tackle front on in the last quarter, and it was a good solid hit. I actually love O'Brien for those kind of... He hits them hard when he can. And the guy next to me's called for in the back. It's like, mate, do I need to explain to you that, yes, he eventually did land in his back on the ground because he got propelled backwards. That's not what the free's for.
I mean,
it was just like, dude, what?
Not that I think that the umpires take a set against the Crows players, but Pickley pointed out that in one of the games where we won by 9 goals, we did not have a Crows player in the 3-2-1 cast by the umpires.
The McGarry was a raw. It absolutely was. And
oh yeah,
you know, I mean, let's be honest. A 2-1 free kick count in a fairly tight game is a bit ridiculous. And I think, you know, to be honest with you, I think the Adelaide Crows are within their rights to approach the SANFL and go, "Oi, you know, we don't mind not, you know, being front runners for awards and stuff like that. But if we're going to play, then, you know, turn it up. Let's just make it an honest contest, can we?"
Yeah.
You know, it'll be interesting to see whether they.
And the thing was, we got within 3 goals.
Well, yeah, you were coming at the end, and for one moment there, I thought Sturt were going to capitulate. But I mean, to Sturt's credit, they held on. And you know, all jokes aside, I thought Sturt played pretty well, considering.
Yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah, they did. They did. Look, Zane Kirkwood, he's a son of a friend of mine, and he played a fantastic game again. You can see why he is a very, very worthy McGarry medalist, Zane Kirkwood, and he played a fantastic game, and I thought he was BOG again too.
Yep. So yeah, we won't cover this too much. I mean, a moment on Van Berlo. He had a quiet game, 9 touches, 4 rebound 50s. You know, not a couple of tackles.
Farewell game for him. That was he's gone.
That's what
he played for. Yeah, and absolute credit to Sturt, who went over and lined up.
Yep.
On one side, and our boys lined up on the other to clap him off the ground.
Yep.
And they did that pretty quickly.
You know, it was actually. It made me think of Scott Thompson, because it was quite a sad way for Van Berlo to go out in front of, you know, half a dozen people at an empty Adelaide Oval. You know, you can say
it was apparently 6,000.
Yeah, I mean, you can say what you like about VB, but in his prime, he was a very good soldier for us. He was a very good captain for us during some, you know, difficult times, and you know, he did fall off the cliff pretty quickly when he did, but. I hope Scotty Thompson was having a look at that, going, "Geez, you know, I don't want to run around the twos next year and get clapped off in front of half a dozen people at the end of a season." You know.
Good point.
Not much to cry about, really. I thought Hampton was all right. John O'Beach, I thought, played really well. And if you want to talk about a mid-sized forward that can take a mark, Josh Jenkins. John O'Beach is the one that could come in quite easily. Harry didn't get a lot of it, but he did actually show that thing called aggression, which we'd like to see. Yeah, particularly early. I thought Tom Doty was down.
The kicks to him were not to advantage.
No.
Who'd you say?
Tom Doty was a bit... Shut up.
He was under the ball. He was always just that little bit under the ball.
Yeah.
When he was going to market, which was really unusual.
To be honest, Nicky, watching him, I thought, to think we gave pick 17 for that...
Yeah, I've got to admit, I mean, again, it's a conversation for another cast, but I'm underwhelmed. We had 2 first-round picks last year, and we picked Miller and Today, and I'll tell you what, underwhelmed. But anyway, we will talk about that on Tuesday night. Final words on the SANFL, guys?
Well, personally, I really don't care that we lost. I did take a great offence at the umpiring because I just don't think that I don't care whether we win or lose, but I can't stand something that's not honest, and I don't believe that was honest. But I'm also probably partially glad that we are out of the race now, and that we're not winning the finals. Otherwise, we'd have every SAFL club bleating their bloody heads off if we dared win the damn thing. So I'm glad we're not winning it. But it also does give now the match committee licence to go ahead and do all the things that they should be doing.
Nick, final thoughts?
Yeah, pretty much what Macca said there. It's going to be interesting the next couple of days as we do exit interviews, etc., and let's see what's going to come out. I think overall, I remember we talked at the start of the year about what would we thought this season was going to be a pass mark, and I'm pretty sure that we all kind of thought we needed to win an extra final, we needed to win 2 finals, but I'm okay with how this year's gone. As you said, Phoenix before, we were 16 wins. We had that horror run at the start of the year, and we came through it quite well. We actually changed the way the game was played a little bit. So I'm hopeful for next year, which is kind of what you always want to be going in. I think there will be some list changes. I think there might be a few little surprises. But I think there's a core there that we know we can build upon.
Yeah, I'm not quite as bullish. First of all, I'm disappointed. It was prelim final was a pass mark for me, particularly after we navigated that first, 8 games or so, reasonably well. I don't think that we used our squad well enough after the bye. I'm really disappointed we didn't put games into a few young guys. It was shades of last season when Camporelli wanted to stick with the old guard, and we all thought at the time that was because of the circumstances, and it was understandable. But there really was no excuse this year to not rotate, blokes through the seniors when we had such an easy run coming into the finals after the bye. And it's disappointing that Harry Wigg finishes the season without an AFL game. It's disappointing that Troy Menzel, despite a couple of injuries, didn't see AFL time. John O'Beach deserved a run. There's a few that we could have given 1 or 2 games to, and it just means that we start next season just a little bit behind where we should have been. I'm really fearful for our team next year if we don't bring in some talent, and I'm doubtful that we're going to manage the list appropriately to bring in some talent. So time will tell, but I'm disappointed. I would have liked to have seen us in a preliminary final this year. I think that would have been pass.
And the coach did say in his farewell speech that we were a good team this year, but good teams that's not good enough, that we want to be, I don't know what the exact words he used, but, better than good. And to do that, he said that we'll have to bring in some talent. And the words have been said, but, the actions, you just got to get them from where? I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. I actually didn't mind Pikey's presser. He still didn't give away much, but what he did say was quite telling, I thought. The fact that it's not good enough just to be a good team. And the fact that, some of it was, game plan and some of it was personnel. The fact that he mentioned personnel, to me, was a glimmer of hope. Let's see how we go.
Yep.
Anyway, look, it's been wonderful bringing everyone the weekend wrap this season. It's been a good ride, and it's a pity that it's come to end so quickly. We thank everyone for their support during the season, not only of the weekend wrap, but also of the other 2 casts, Tuesday Night Live and the Thursday preview show with Scorpus. Thanks to Scorpus, who won't get a chance to say goodbye for all his efforts this year. He's carried that Thursday cast really well. And of course, we're going to continue Tuesday Night Live, not only for this week, but during the summer. So the plan is that we're going to have a Tuesday Night Live cast this week just as a bit of a wash-up. And then from there on in, we'll have a Tuesday night show only each week. Certainly, initially just to cover the rest of the finals, but also during the summer we're going to talk about sport in general. So there's some other sports around that everyone likes to enjoy during the off season. We'll cover a bit of A-League. We'll cover a bit of cricket. We've got an EPL guy coming in that's going to help us out with a bit of EPL action, and American Crow is going to be our NFL correspondent live from Cleveland. So,
Oh, the Browns.
The Browns. Yeah, he's already into me about Pittsburgh already, even though we're already a bloody lock for the Super Bowl. But anyway.
Yeah, Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so for those that enjoy listening to us on a Tuesday night, we will have content for you still on a Tuesday night. And obviously, pre-season is around before you know it. We'll have the Women's League to cover come February, and then before you know it, we'll be back on deck with AFL again. So stick with us, and thanks very much to Macca and Nikki for being with me every Sunday night pretty much this season. It's been a pleasure, you guys.
No, an absolute pleasure, and I hope that Tuesday night we'll do a bit of...
Except for the one where I wasn't.
I see, I was going to be nice and not bring that up, Nick, but now that you mention it...
Yeah, I hope we do a bit of list management stuff on Tuesday as well.
Yeah, well, look, we've got obviously we've got a bit of a wash-up, Macca, and then we'll have after the grand finals done and dusted, we'll have trade weekend and the draft to talk about. We'll likely get one or two people on that have a bit of knowledge in those areas to come on, and we will be very much talking about list management issues and trade period and draft, etc., etc. Plenty of us to talk about on a Tuesday night, both during the rest of the finals and afterwards. So
good stuff.
Yeah, stick with us. All right, guys. Well, I'll stop rambling on now. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you on Tuesday night.
Okay, bye.
See ya.